What drives our decision making with Māori land? I did a PhD that looked at harmonising whānau raru in the Māori Land Trust. It seemed to be that there was a lot of interesting conflicts going on with our whānau that I thought it would be good to have a look at and get a really sort of a deeper insight into what's going on. So I'm only going to touch on some of the results of my research, but I think you'll find them interesting. So my kōrero today is around values and emotions. And what tends to happen is we have a conversation about our values, manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, kotahitanga, but in actual reality, it's our emotional system that often drives the way that we think and make decisions. So I'm going to talk to both of these kaupapa today. I thought we'll just start with some stats, and a lot of you probably know these stats, but I thought we'd just go over them briefly. Just under 1.5 million hectares of New Zealand is Māori land, which makes up just over 5% of the land mass in New Zealand. But what I find really interesting is that's represented by under 30,000 land titles. That's a massive amount of governance structures that we need on land entities, and represented by 2.7 million individual ownership interests. Yeah, so that's a lot of interests in Māori land out there. So governance is pretty important because there's a lot of land out there to govern, and so we need to be very mindful that we are very conscious of the way we're making decisions and behaving when it comes to Māori Land Trust governance. Okay, so let's start with the kōrero around values. Obviously we are all doing this for our whānau, our mokopuna, our nieces, our nephews, our kuia kaumātua. Those are the values that we hold at the centre of the conversation when we're making decisions about land. Yep, so I just thought I'll digress to another study I did. I interviewed 15 Māori senior managers from around the country, and they were based in a variety of organisations. Some of them were in tribal entities, some of them were in government, some of them in profit-making companies, and then charitable organisations as well. So I interviewed them, got the data transcribed, went to analyse what was coming through in that conversation, and the frequency of the word whānau came through 120 times within the transcripts, and the frequency of the word family came up 64 times. So that tells us our value system is sometimes very implicit, is very strongly driving the way that we behave, the way that we think, the types of decisions that we're going to make in our work environments. Some of these managers were in Māori-centric roles. For example, they may have been the Māori manager at NZTE. Some of them were not Māori-centric roles. They were senior managers in multinational companies, but yet they still heavily organise and relate to people in a very Māori way. So our value systems have a very strong impact on the way that we think and manage and make decisions. Yep. So a lot of the research will show these value systems that we have, or the tangas. I heard that's not a good thing to say anymore, or the tangas. But these values influence the way that we will make decisions, such as we will, and we all know this is not new to you guys, tend to work on things that have an intergenerational outcome. Also, Māori entities, land entities, tribal entities, they tend to be risk averse. So for us, we can't lose our assets, we can't lose our resources, so we absolutely must make decisions that keep those intact. We tend to like to have collective decision making and give everybody a voice, and the trade-off for that is a longer decision making time frame. And also our value systems will drive the types of projects that we will get involved with. So we're less likely to engage in projects that are purely profit-centred. However, what we also see is this, this notion I call of hyper-emotions, and I'll explain hyper-emotions a bit later on, but the way people behave or the way people feel can often override the value systems that we hold. Yep. So emotions and feelings, they're basically information. The way we feel about something is informing us about our relationship to something. They developed and evolved as innate survival instincts, basically, to help us survive. And they tell us where to put energy. So if we feel angry about something, it tells us where our energy needs to go. If we feel sad about something, it tells us that we're experiencing a loss of some kind. But emotions are not that simple. They're very complex, and as we all know, relationships are complex. So it's not quite black and white. So I found these 5 hyper-emotions operating with regards to Māori land. And usually we have intense emotions about things that we feel very close about, which of course for us is whānau and whenua. So I'll talk to a wee bit about these 5 hyper emotions. Yep. So this is a quote. There was a lot of mamai coming through in my interviews. A lot of people upset in the interviews, a lot of people in tears, even men. A lot of men end up crying when they retell stories about their land, because it's so deeply connected to people and place. So this is a quote taken from one of the participants, and she talks about our people are still suffering. And the interesting thing I take from this quote is that even though the event or the occasion occurred many generations ago, the people still feel that event as if it happened to them. So one of the problems we have with regards to Māori being disrupted with their land relationships is that loss and sadness has tended to be disregarded, and it hasn't fully been acknowledged by our current government, and so we need a lot of work to recognise that loss and separation that's occurred for many of our people. Kia ora tui. Riri. A lot of anger out there. This is I don't know, 6 or 7 quotes taken from different people in the interviews, You can see the underlined words. It's like a war zone out there, guys. When we go into hui, you need to take your ammunition with you and your defence blockades as well. So, yeah, we have to think about that. Is that the environments that we want to be discussing our kaupapa in? Is that positive environments that help us to talk through issues? I don't think so. Then there's a fear. There's a bit of a fear that was coming through in the interviews. People scared of making decisions because when people are afraid, they tend to stay with the status quo. There's this also this kind of paranoia as well that possibly someone's still going to come and take the land, whether it be the government or the bank, and that impacts the way that we might not make decisions, that we might just cling very closely and not let anybody into our land space. Lots of jealousy, kind of behaviours going on as well. Grudge holding, people holding grudges against each other. This line here about how the grandfather stole the tractor and so they'll never ever trust them again. It came up quite a few times in interviews in different kind of scenarios. Yes, so some of us are holding on to grudges. So hyper emotions. Hyper emotions are kind of extreme emotions, and they represent a reaction to a situation or an event that is too extreme. It's an overreaction to something that might be quite trivial. So when somebody has an overreaction to something that's trivial, just say, for example, I don't know, a $20 expenditure on petrol for the lawnmower, and if you're going right up to the sky around that in terms of your anger, then often that hyper emotion comes from somewhere else, and we have to, and the trick is finding the source, and it's each person's own job to find that source of where that anger really, really comes from. Yes, so where do our hyper emotions come from? Is it because of colonisation? Has colonisation done this to us? And I really kind of looked at this I was thinking, is it maybe it's just us? Maybe we just, maybe we're just extra angry types of people. So I kind of came up with my own conclusion around that. Yes, colonisation did disrupt a lot of our behaviours. Traditionally, you wouldn't be swearing and ranting and raving at your auntie or kuia because you all needed each other to survive. And so those relationships were absolutely survival relationships. But today we can go into a meeting, we can throw abusive words at each other, and we can walk out and go home and back to our jobs. So colonisation did remove a lot of the lid that was placed on us. And I do think we are an expressive type of people, which makes us very special. So when we got hyper emotions operating in our land environments, we get a lot of these types of decisions, ego-based, a lot of sabotaging. We sabotage each other, we squash each other. A lot of kōrero from rangatahi feeling that they're squashed, their ideas are squashed, they can't flourish, they can't thrive. They feel that elders are not leading them through Apathy, when people have had enough, they walk away. And when people walk away, they take all that resource, capability, energy with them. Polarizing, we get these polarizing situations in land trusts, us versus them, some divides. These divides start emerging. Grudging. The thing with grudging is people who hold on to grudges want to be right, and there's a sense of identity and feeling right. So we get a bit of that, and then entitlement. Lots of entitlement. Some tribes are experiencing this more than others, where you just fill out a form now and you'll get some money, and that tends to be the relationship people have with their land, filling out a form to get some money. So that's how these hyper emotions start to impact the way that decisions are made in land trusts. So the trick for us is to know what system you're operating from. Is it this shared value system, or is it your own emotional system? And also to know that it's dynamic, that you come in and out of both. That's the message I leave today, is to bring awareness to yourself around what system you're operating from, and to know when it's a hyper emotive state. And just some of the language that is being used around trying to describe this stuff is trauma, which I don't really like to use that word. It feels very bit intense, but a lot of Indigenous people are starting to use the word soul wounds to describe some of these hyper emotions. And so when you see people in these hyper emotive states, just be mindful that something deep happened for them, and so be kind to each other. Kia ora. Oh, one more slide. Yeah. I can take a couple of questions very quickly. Kia ora tui.
Kia ora, Kia ora ki. That was very enlightening. Just put a lot of
that's only
data
like
and
1/10 of my research findings, by the way.
Oh, come on. So that shed a lot of light on what's been going on with a lot of us in a lot of our places, not just with our lands, our marae, our kura, our community hui, and we have these sorts of things going on, and they are very restrictive and create illness, really. So my question is, what are the solutions to this? So, okay, what recognition is one thing. So if you're in a hui and somebody starts attacking you, you can recognise that it's a hyper emotion, there's something deeper going on, and be the better person and not hold the grudge, and just ka aroha ki aia or kia rātou. But if it's just a continuum, just constantly happening, and we're not really moving like we could be, what do we do? Like, how do we address this deep-seated emotional, spiritual mamai?
Everyone always goes to this question, and I don't have the answer. But that's the next part of my research. But I'm going to take advice from my cousin Sarah, who last week said to me, throw it back to the audience. What do you think the solutions are?
Kia ora whānau. Are we working? So that's kind of partly where my role with TPK comes in a little bit, and I literally just started on Monday, so I'm trying to run before I can walk, as you can imagine. So part of what I'm doing is looking at how to increase the efficacy across our Māori land blocks. And really at the hub of our Māori land blocks are our trustees. So it is a real heartfelt space for many of us, and that was really beautiful how you put across all that knowledge around the values and also the emotions. And so far, I've only been on the job for 3 days, but there's a real, in my notebook there, I've already got 50 things written down that are blockers to either our whānau, our people, all these challenges that we see among many of our whānau, our hapu, across our trustees. So that is the real challenge, is to look at, because we have seen over years, many years, lots of money, lots of time, lots of effort being thrown into this space, but really to no real avail. So we're really serious on looking at what is going to be effective, and really looking at some solutions moving forward. And to be fair, it's going to take a collaborative approach, because for many years people have been trying, but I think this is where it needs that all-encompassing. So I'm meeting with Kiri tomorrow.
Yeah. I've got a couple of initiatives that I'll be working on to help progress this conversation, but it's not up to me to tell people how to heal. It's up to all of us.
Kia ora, Kiri. I wonder, doing your research, if you came across the issue of whenua blocks that don't have entities and the challenge there for those shareholders.
So to me, this question goes to land ownership issues, and Tina brought this up briefly around this. We're still subscribing to imposed colonial land ownership views, and we need to have a national conversation around what alternative land ownership might look like, how we might transform to that. I actually find a lot of Māori don't actually know how they got their land block, how it came into their hands, and a lot of our people now are just assuming that this little square block with the title C1569 is how our land system was traditionally held. So, yeah, my view there is that we actually need to go right. We need to go back further. I think we'll leave it there, because we put a thing on time. Kia ora whānau, you can come and ask me questions if you have anything. Kia ora.